lot of American young men who fell in love with pirates. Did you guys ever love pirates? I guess maybe back then it was, the whole Treasure Island thing, and then more recently the Pirates of the Caribbean and all that sort of thing. And I don't know what it was exactly that was so attractive about pirates. The open seas, the wind at your back, and adventure at your bow, and a hearty treasure map in your hands, or that sort of thing, that got people so excited about pirates. Maybe it was just the great accents, I don't know. But the sort of romanticized version of pirates wasn't really the reality at all. Something out of, Pirates of the Caribbean, yo-ho, yo-ho, and all this sort of thing. It was really actually a pretty awful existence, and the men and women that were involved in it were not your most upstanding citizens. But the one thing I think that attracted everybody to it, including the real pirates themselves, was buried treasure. Having X marks the spot. And I remember back when I was a kid, we used to go to my godmother's house on Lake Tahoe down in Northern California. And every year when we would go, the highlight of the year was the treasure hunt. And what my godmother and her family would do is they would put together clues. And they would start us out with one clue, and you'd have to, do the whole 10 paces, west or something. We didn't know north, south, east, or west, but, towards the tree, and then turn to the left, and then look for your next clue, that sort of thing. And always the excitement grew and grew and grew until we were down on the beach there on the shores of Lake Tahoe, and we had found where X marks the spot, and we were digging away madly into the sand, and then we would find the treasure chest. And we would open it up, with great glee, and everybody was so happy. And I remember getting things like little plastic airplanes and Super Balls, if you guys remember Super Balls. And, it was just incredible stuff to me. Cheap junk to some people, but I had worked hard for it. And here when I found it, it was just this incredible, valuable treasure to me. If only there were such treasures in real life. Well, as a matter of fact, there are. And we're going to talk about the biggest treasure of all this morning, which is so great that it would be worth anything, any price that you would pay in order to find it. And that's the gospel of Jesus Christ. And in the last few verses of chapter 13, it's what Jesus is talking about. Now, if you remember, Matthew chapter 13 is a series of parables. Ordinary stories with an important spiritual point to them. And the theme of these parables is how the gospel affects planet Earth. And mainly the people on planet Earth. What kind of effect does the gospel have when it reaches an individual? And we saw the parable of the sower, first of all, which talks about the condition of your heart, the soil of your heart, and how receptive you are to hearing this good news. We saw the parable of the weeds, which really shows that evil and good, those that reject and those that accept the gospel, will coexist here on earth until the end of the age. And that as time goes on, it's really very difficult to tell apart those that are redeemed by the gospel and those that aren't until the angels themselves are able to separate them out. Well, finally here this morning we're going to see the final three parables. And one of them is actually very much like the parable of the weeds, but the first two talk again about the value of the gospel message and the character of a person who hears it with good heart soil. We're going to see here how the gospel spreads, the attitude of those who are exposed to it, and then the result of that exposure. Just like we saw before, the gospel starts small. The kingdom of God starts small like a mustard seed, but it grows really big. Its growth may be invisible like yeast through dough, but its spread is broad. And so now Jesus asks the question, how valuable is the gospel to you? How valuable is Jesus to you? And if you're kind of a pre-Christian here this morning, and you might not really have thought about it very much, except maybe to say, Jesus Christ, yeah, he was a good guy who lived a long time ago. And, I use his name sometimes when I hit my thumb with my hammer. But other than that, I don't really pay a lot of attention to him. But maybe even you, as someone who believes in Jesus Christ, when was the last time you really thought about the value of our rescuer, of our Messiah, Jesus? So we're going to begin in verse 44. And he says, "The kingdom of heaven is like treasure hidden in a field, which a man found and covered up. Then in his joy he goes and sells all that he has and buys that field." Now it's important for us, once again, as we're looking at these parables, don't make them walk on all fours. Don't interpret every little tiny bit of them, because you need to get the point of what Jesus is making. This is not a lesson on how to swindle somebody who owns property and doesn't realize there's oil on it by buying it cheap and then suddenly, oh, there's oil. That's not what this parable is about at all. Now, the guy that Jesus would be describing would be a day laborer. Doesn't own the field. He'd earn like a denarius for a day's wage, and he's going out and he's digging in the field, probably preparing it for crops. Maybe he's weeding it, doing some other kind of work, and he's going along with his hoe, and clank, clank, he hits on something under the ground, but it's not a rock, and he digs down in there and he finds, a pirate chest. No. Just want to know if you guys were paying attention. He finds some incredible, valuable old coin or a chunk of gold that got buried in some past battle or whatever it might be. Now, if he had dug with his shovel and pulled that all the way up and brought it up to the surface of the ground, Roman law would have said it belongs to the owner of the field. But because he left it in the ground where it was and just kind of pushed the soil back, he could go, and he probably didn't have a lot. Maybe he borrowed from friends. Who knows what he did? But he gave everything he had. He sold every bit of everything. He put it all in so he could buy that field and then go back and obtain that treasure, because then it would be his. Now, what is this telling us? It's about the gospel, right? The spread of the gospel, the kingdom of God on the earth. And some people, as they're going about their daily lives, they're working for their daily denarius, they're not really looking for anything. Their life is just what it is. They go to work, they bring their lunch, they go to home, sit in front of the TV and fall asleep, Then, maybe they're driving along and the radio glitches and it suddenly goes to, 107.5 or 107.1, and they're suddenly listening to K-Love radio and somebody's singing about the love of Jesus Christ, and they go, what is that? And they flip again and it goes to, KPDQ, and they're listening to, Chuck Swindoll or somebody else is teaching on the radio talking about the love of God through Jesus Christ, and they're going, what's wrong with this radio? And they keep changing the station. They stumble upon the gospel. Maybe they're sitting in a restaurant, and those people in the booth next to them are just being so annoying because they keep talking about how much Jesus Christ loves them. And I just can't get away from it, they say. They're not looking for the gospel. They're not looking for Jesus Christ, but they can't help but stumble over it. So here's where the quality of